And while I think bullying is a huge problem, I've spoken in schools where there's nothing but bullying posters and absolutely nothing about how to be resilient, how to marshal the character strengths to stand up for yourself or to be a friend to somebody who's being bullied.
Welcome to Empowered Kids TV, where we introduce you to the people and ideas to help you take action to create the family of your dreams. Today's guest is one of the world's leading experts on the science behind successful goal setting and the use of good grit to achieve hard things. For more than 30 years, she's been sharing her research-backed actionable strategies to help people cultivate more grit and dig deeper to clarify and achieve their toughest goals. A Harvard graduate with a master's in applied positive psychology, she has authored 6 books which has been translated into multiple languages all across the globe. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, BBC, NPR, and CNN, just to name a few. But grit? Grit wasn't instinctive to our guest. In fact, freeing herself from a childhood that was void of her mother's love and packed with the secrets of covering up an eating disorder from her early teens all the way into her marriage, our guest had to cultivate grit to save her own life. Without a memory of ever being hugged, kissed, or even having her hand held by her mother, Our guest sought happiness in all the trappings of trophies and academic qualifications and the ideal picture lifestyle, only to learn the hard way that a happy life is only created by finding happiness inside of ourselves first. So please, help me to welcome a woman who has not only found her grit through her pain, but is also helping thousands of others to do the same. The amazing Caroline Miller.
Wow, thank you. That is the first time someone has pieced together every aspect of my life as part of an introduction. So that was really awesome to hear and kind of soul-bearing, but thank you for that.
Soul-bearing and an amazing life. It was, for me, a real journey to do the background research into your life and how you found your path to grit. And I'm hoping that we can dive into that and pull some of the juice out of some of the life journeys that you've had so far. Let's dive in and talk about, what is your definition for grit?
My definition for grit is it's the passionate pursuit of hard goals outside of your comfort zone that require you to take risks and to live your best life, but in the process, this is where my definition is a little bit different. In the process of doing those things, it has the impact of awing and inspiring other people as well to become better, bolder, bigger, braver, more giving, more purposeful. So I believe that it's one of these qualities that is best seen and cultivated in the in terms of uplifting the collective. So I think we've had so much emphasis on happiness and grit and resilience when it comes to an individual in the last 20, 30 years. And I think what's more interesting and powerful is to think of how do these qualities work in tandem to become contagious and to improve flourishing and grit and resilience and awe-inspiring behavior in families and communities and organizations, just about everywhere. So I really do think that grit is only good when its outcome also inspires and uplifts other people who witness that behavior.
I love that. And I love that in your work you qualify good grit versus bad grit. Yeah. And really, I think it talks true to the impact that you're having in the pursuit of your goals to the collective around you. So I really do love that. I wanted to ask your opinion because, as you rightly said, for the last 20 years, grit has not only become a buzzword, but it's become something that we're all striving towards. And it was clear doing the research on grit that a lot of people felt like it was something that was missing from their lives that they had to work towards cultivating and developing. Yeah. And so I wanted to ask, why do you think grit was missing? And I know your work, you think, not just from our generation, but from a younger generation, even more so.
Yeah, I do. One of the things I've always strived to do is not write anecdotal books of just my feelings or what I witnessed, but really what does the research show us? Because I believe, and I know from the research I've looked at on the differences between men and women, is women are believed more often when they have research behind what it is they say. And I think I instinctively went in the direction of, if I'm going to write a book, I want it to be evidence-based. So I followed the research. And I certainly included some of my own experiences with my children, but I really do believe we have been in a culture of dumbing down excellence for the last 30-some years. And that was done with good intentions, I think, this self-esteem parenting movement where we were told to praise our children, make them feel happy, give them what they wanted, because as the parenting experts and psychiatrists and sociologists said, our happy children would then become confident and they would become high achievers and they would do good things. And what I saw as a mother as this unfolded, and I was just kind of following directions, was that my children didn't have to wait for anything. They were told that they were winners all the time. Grades began to disappear. Trophies were handed out with impunity. They didn't have to do anything to be told how special they were. And I know as I followed the research that a lot of other things happened. I mean, the one of the outcomes apparently is there are more narcissists and sociopaths as a result of the self-esteem parenting movement. But we also created a generation of children who were told always to be careful. You know, playgrounds were dumbed down. They became these plastic kind of low, rounded things that didn't involve any thrills or risk-taking. When children stopped climbing trees, they started to stay indoors so that they wouldn't be kidnapped. There's some staggering figures about how often children have been just alone with screens or not interacting with other human beings. So I think we experienced a lot of things, a loss of empathy, a loss of connectedness. We know from positive psychology that really the chief contributor to well-being is our relationships with other people, and you don't build those by text message. You don't build those on Facebook. You don't build those by seeking likes on Instagram. And so there are a lot of things that have contributed to the dumbing down and the the stripping away of the need to be resilient or gritty. And I think the pendulum has started to swing back. It was high time that this happened. And frankly, the house is on fire, in my opinion. And we have to go back to having character emphases. And kids have to work hard for the things that they're given. They shouldn't just be given whatever they want. They need to learn how to overcome hardship so that they find out what their strengths are, who their friends are, what their purpose is. I mean, these are all the things that add up to the good life. And so I think we're heading back there, and it can't happen too quickly.
I love that. And I want to dive a bit deeper. I think when I strip that back and I think of our generation, so not the ones that are now in the soft cushion playground, but the ones that decided that there was going to be a soft cushion playground. What I see is an interesting dynamic with pain. And I think as a generation, we didn't have the tools to lean into pain. And so we did a couple of things. The first was there was a search for a quick fix for everything. And I think we can see that in various aspects, the pharmaceutical industry, the way we have food, everything.
Yep.
And the second was, I will do everything to protect my kids from pain.
Yes.
So as you do research on grit and the impact of grit, how important do you think it is to lean into and to become comfortable with the pursuit of working on your goal through your pain?
I think it's everything. I think you have to become comfortable with discomfort. Because at the end of the day, we know from a variety of different parts of research that we all scan our days for what we did that we're proud of. And we do this unconsciously. We do this at the end of the day and possibly throughout the day. I don't exactly know how the research kind of parses out on this, but the reason we do this is the thing that feels best to people is making progress on valued goals. And the only things that bring people pride and what's called authentic self-esteem are the things we pursue that were outside of our comfort zone. Because when we pursue mediocre goals, when we pursue low-hanging fruit, when we know that we can probably get the things that we seek, we end up feeling mediocre and possibly inferior and insecure with a need to become grandiose and even have a fixed mindset, as Carol Dweck would say. And so it's everything to be able to deal with discomfort. We also know that the best lives, the well-lived lives, are the one that contain at least 3 to 7 significant setbacks. Why? Because there's something called post-traumatic growth. We grow from being broken. We grow from not getting what we want. It shakes us up in a way that's been found that we question, are we on the right path? Are we surrounded by the right people? Do we have a purpose that makes sense, or have things shifted? Have we discovered who our friends are, not when things are good, but when things are bad? So yes, and we have to find out what we're made of at all costs, because we know that if you have too few setbacks in life, it's as poor a quality of life as if you had too many setbacks. So as a parent, as a mother, I hated seeing my children suffer and not get what they want and be hurt by various slings and arrows. in life. But the fact of the matter is, when I look at all their lives, and they're adults now, all of the best things that happened in their lives that taught them who they were and that gave them confidence and courage are the worst things that happened to them. And I say that unequivocally. I wouldn't have believed it when I was a young mother, and it's painful to watch, and it's horrible, and I cried tears of pain, not wanting them to hurt. And yet, now in hindsight, it's such a blessing to have your children not get what they want from time to time. So that's how they develop the thick skin that allows them to go out and become entrepreneurs, to take risks, to start companies, to just have the courage to follow a passion, even if they don't know where it leads them. So it's everything in life to lean into discomfort. So you hit it on the money with that question. So thank you for honing in on exactly what matters.
You know what? I think I grew up understanding that the lilies grew where the mud was. And
I love that.
And even before I had kids, I can look back at my own life and see that I grew the most through my pain. And I continue to. And so now I'm trying to have a more loving relationship with pain. When it comes up, I go, okay, what are you here to teach me? What is this for? Because I'm also a firm believer that life happens for us rather than to us. But I can also see the other side of the self-esteem movement. And so I want us to be fair and talk both sides. What I can see, especially with regards to school, I see it most in school compared to the everybody gets a trophy. In school, when you have an argument to remove grades and remove competition, I see that we have generations where your sense of self-worth was something that was defined outside of you. And through your school life, there was a grade that actually set it. And so you were actually classed as an academic child, or you might be good with your hands because you clearly weren't getting the grades. And I think for a lot of people, they took that as something not about what they could achieve, but something about themselves. And when we look at our education system, it's moving a lot slower than the rest of the world. And I think it's a long time before we catch up and change that system where it's not so screwy and it's judging everybody by the same criteria, even though they're different. So in that instance, I can see the argument to take away grades. So let's talk about that sense of self-worth being defined by something external to us a bit.
Well, it's a really good point, because I think there's a germ of goodness in all of these movements, and I think it started out with exactly that intention, which is children are being graded and measured and being taught that their self-worth is this, that, or the other thing, when in fact it's not the measure of the man or the measure of the woman. You may not be aware of the fact that there is a global movement called positive education. And if you haven't interviewed anyone at the forefront of that particular movement, you might want to, because schools are changing. And there's beginning to be more character education and emphasis on identifying children's strengths early in life, not later in life, so that they understand, for example, that maybe their creativity or their love of learning or their social intelligence are some of the ways in which they lead in the world that bring them joy and benefit, so that they begin to feel more comfortable in their skin. Also, we want to talk about the growth mindset approach that Carol Dweck pioneered. She's at Stanford University. She wrote a wonderful book called Mindset, The Psychology of Success. And one of the things we don't want to do is take away all grading, because when children are given the kind of feedback like, and this has been studied, I didn't give you a B plus, I gave you a B because I know you are capable of better work if you do the following things. If children are given the hope that they can learn the kinds of things that will make them even better at English, better at maths, better at social studies, it creates an environment in which they feel like they can grow towards and build the muscles that build their memory, that build their intelligence, that build their ability to love learning. So I think we went far too far in doing things in the United States, for example, of taking valedictorians away. there was a school that I talk about in my speeches that named 222 students valedictorian in a school in Ohio. Now, this is like devalued currency. If everybody gets the same award because we're so afraid of spotting and naming excellence when someone who really has done the work and is gifted in that way, then nobody feels special. And we just continue to contribute to this dumbing down of excellence. So I really would like to see more things coming back like that. It's taken this insidiously dangerous turn where, for example, clubs in schools, they won't have a president. They'll name a president every 6 weeks so that everybody can put the title president on their resume or their CV. I mean, that's like spreading the wealth in a way that, again, isn't special. So I think there's a happy medium. I mean, one thing that concerned me about my schools, my children's high school here in Bethesda, Maryland, it's a very affluent suburb of Washington, D.C., a lot of, PhDs and master's degree parents, so education's very important, is they took away the straight A donut breakfast because parents complained that their children who got a B felt bad seeing the children with A's eating donuts, and the school caved in. But where they didn't cave in, just for example, is there was one quarterback named to the football team as captain of the football team. There was one actress who got the lead in the play. So if we make those things sacred, but not things like grades, what's the message? So I think it's a nuanced conversation that has to happen. I think there had to be an explosion and a discussion around these things. But at the same time, all we have to do is look at the results of stripping all these awards out of their lives and see, wow, this has been a really bad trend in helping our children to develop resilience and grit and go out there. And as I said, start companies. I mean, we found that American entrepreneurship went down 9% in the last generation. And I could go on and on. My book, Getting Grit, has all of these statistics, but I think the conversation needs to include both sides of the dialogue.
And I love that because I think it is about finding a balance. One of the things that I did as a mom was try to figure out how I can create the balance for myself within our network. And so I looked at the people that were being highlighted as the grittiest. And it's usually you've got really outstanding athletes, some that just do amazing things with their bodies that you can't conceive how they've had the perseverance to do that. You look at some of our historic heroes like Martin Luther King that just had the ability to go beyond. And then sometimes I look at my kids and I can compare the difference because I think I have one that's grittier than the other. And I could compare the difference in terms of what generates that level of grit and that tenacity. And one of the things that stood out to me was having a goal that was internally driven versus an external goal. You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, there was a lot that you just said in that statement. I touch upon different forms of what I call authentic grit in my book, Getting Grit, because I do believe we have examples of people who do extraordinary things with their bodies, and I call it Mount Olympus grit. And those are paragons of excellence in athletics, but not just athletics, people who have, let's say, become Paralympians, people who come back from war with mangled arms and legs, who then go out and learn how to row with prosthetic arms and legs. I mean, to me, that is Mount Olympus grit. It's people pushing their bodies past what they think they're capable of in order to develop grit. There is historic grit. I call it Mount Rushmore grit. And what fascinated me about that is that when you look at all the turning points in history, there's always a man or a woman who stands at the nexus of change, who exhibits this kind of grit. And it's not just that they were resilient. They certainly weren't born that way. We know that girls are born with more willpower, self-regulation than boys. They start with an advantage. But you can develop grit. And that's why I wrote my book, because I didn't want to write a book about things that you're only wired at birth to have, because you can develop them. But I found that it was a man or woman who stood at this nexus, who withstood the worst of human beings. Think of Martin Luther King and the fire hoses. You think about a Nelson Mandela. You think about a Gandhi. You think about Malala Yousafzai. I mean, you think about the dignity and the self-respect with which they underwent some of the worst cruelties of other humans. Kind of Mount Rushmore grit. There's celebrity grit, like a J.K. Rowling, people who use their celebrity to actually change the world by persisting through, just with her, writing a book after she had failed at everything else. As a result, a generation of children grew up reading in ways they hadn't read before. But I think the thing that we want to focus on is what I call ordinary grit. And ordinary grit is people like you and me who just learn to be passionate about something that's an internally driven goal. It's called intrinsic motivation in the research. And because we're lit up with passion is the separator between just being gritty, a finisher at all costs, just because you want to be persistent and diligent and dogged, and being authentically gritty, because when you just want to be a finisher at all costs, you may not have the passion that it takes to go through the dark nights of the soul with something that truly matters to you. And so it has to be something that lights you up. It has to be something that you want to do even when no one's looking. It has to be the kind of thing that you're not going to get a trophy at the end of the day, but it just lights you up and you can't look away from it. And so I call that ordinary grit. And I have a story in my book about a U.S. Army veteran named Kevin Downs, who was in a Humvee accident where 5 other men were blown up into the air when they went over an IED, an improvised explosive device. And the other 5 men died, and Kevin Downs lived. And he went back to the United States, again, with prosthetic arms and legs. And what was so interesting was he didn't feel like he had a purpose anymore. It had been duty, honor, country before. Now he would wake up and it's like, who needs me? Where do I go? What is my purpose in life? And then he got the idea that he could go cut the grass at the high school where he had been a 3-sport athlete, and they didn't have to pay him. So he called and he said, can I come cut the grass? You don't have to pay me. I want to be of service. And they said, well, of course you can come cut the grass. So he had a riding lawnmower. And then the most interesting thing happened, and this is what shaped my view of what good grit is. The football coach noticed that all of these teenage boys on his football team, who he said had been whining, just whinging, I guess is the word you use, about how hot it was when they practiced. And they had 2-a-day practices, and there were bugs, and it was hard. And what happened was that they all stopped being whiners, as this Army veteran with mangled arms and legs silently rode a riding mower on the football field. And I started thinking about the fact that this is the kind of grit we're all shooting to emulate, witness, uplift, use as role models. Because when you're in the presence of that kind of behavior, you can't help but ask yourself, what if I lived like that? What if I dug a little bit deeper? What if I had the courage to follow my dreams? And to me, that is authentic grit. And that's the kind of grit that's contagious, that makes everyone better, not just one person. It makes everybody better. So really, that's what my book is about, is this quality that all of us can choose to cultivate. Some of us may start with more resilience than others. Some of us may have more patience, the ability to wait for gratification. Some of us may have a little bit more persistence and a mental ability to shut out pain. Whatever it is, you bake a grit cake. It's a cultivation of a number of character strengths and traits that together build this very important quality. And I do believe that we have to have a grit revolution, because we talk so much about bullying and so little about resilience. And while I think bullying is a huge problem, I've spoken in schools where there's nothing but bullying posters. and absolutely nothing about how to be resilient, how to marshal the character strengths to stand up for yourself or to be a friend to somebody who's being bullied. So again, I think the pendulum swung too far in the direction of victimization.
Yep.
And taking the easy way and being a winner no matter what. And I think we stripped away some of the goodness that makes us proud of ourselves. So it's definitely something we need to look at and talk about.
So let's take family life now. So family life, for the average family, we've done everything to give our kids a really nice, comfy, cushion life.
Right.
There's not a lot of scraping your knees and falling down and getting back up. Even on the playground, when you fall down, it's a nice soft area. Understanding the relationship with pain, understanding the relationship with self-value, and understanding that intrinsic motivation is important. How do we take all of that as parents and begin to use that through different tools or conversations we're having within our family to help our kids start to develop grit?
Well, I think it's important to help them begin to identify what their interests are. I mean, it's very rare for children to have passions, but what they can have are interests. And we might encourage them to go deeper in one interest instead of being a jack of all trades and master of none. Because I think some children give up an interest when it gets hard, when you suddenly have to practice for 2 hours a day, or you get cut from the soccer team because you weren't fast enough. Well, those are things that you can work on. And so when you see people with a lot of interests who don't dare to go any deeper because they're afraid of what might come if they look at that, I think as parents we have to be sure that we're talking about effort, not outcome. How much effort did you put into this? Not did you win, not did you get the highest grade. It's what did you do to be your best self? And I also think it's important to ask, who else did you help to become their best self today? Who did you assist in accomplishing their goals? Because I would argue that you don't have a true friend unless you know what their most cherished dreams and goals are. Because if we aren't coming together to help each other accomplish goals, then no one's going to achieve anything that's hard. I also believe that parents have a key responsibility to be going after hard things while their children watch them. Because we know that you can learn how to be gritty by having the right role models. And those role models can be in history books, they can be on television shows, they can be in movies, but it can also be someone in your family. And when I interviewed people who I felt fit my definition for authentic grit, I found that the most common answer to the question, where did you learn to be like this? Where did you learn to take these kinds of risks? How did you learn to change the channel in your brain when you wanted to quit, but you talked yourself into doing just 10 more minutes? The most common answer I got was a grandmother had taught them to be like this.
Wow.
And it makes sense to me in hindsight because I think we know, and this Time's Up, Me Too movement, I mean, they're all overdue movements that have exposed the dark side of sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, all kinds of abuses to women. For a woman to succeed, she has to be so much better than the average man. And for people of color, it's even harder. At least the research I've looked at shows that. And so I think that we have to identify and talk about the people in our lives, in our families who've overcome hard things, who didn't succeed at first. As parents, sometimes we pretty it up so that our children don't have to hear stories of hardship. We don't want to trouble their minds. Well, you know what? My children have now told me that some of the things they've gone after in life have been because they saw me dare to go out and do things and not succeed at first and cry and be troubled, but get back up on my feet and do it again. And because they saw it up close, they knew that they too could do it as well. So those are just a few of the things that come to mind when I think about what can we as parents do? Well, be the change you want to see.
I love that. And I honestly think that's the only way we can teach. I think our words go in, they go out.
Yeah.
But the model that we present to our kids is really the way we allow them to learn from us. I love the idea of of pursuing hard things. And one of the things that I did in my own home after learning about Carol Dweck's work, we started to celebrate our failures around the dinner table.
Yeah.
Was part of what did you do today is what did you fail at today?
Yeah.
And I think that gave my kids a different mindset, that trying something hard and failing was something that we could celebrate, and there was nothing wrong with it. And it wasn't something that defined them, but just the journey. And so I think making hard things lighter, not personally.
There has been this fail fast movement in Silicon Valley where they celebrate failure, and there's even at Google X the Day of the Dead where they all come together and celebrate all the projects that didn't work out. And I think there's a lot of power in that. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, tells very famously, she tells the story of her father every night at dinner saying, "What did you fail at?" Now, there's a limit to this kind of talk, and the reason why I say that is because we can start to celebrate failure in a way that has people going out and just doing ridiculous things to come at home and say they failed. These have to be strategic failures, things that you tried to do that meant something to you, not just that you went up to somebody in a park and said, "Will you go on a date with me?" I mean, okay, okay, great, that was a risk, but really in life, what did that teach you? Maybe it teaches an introvert to actually have a conversation, but when we talk about failure, it needs to be you went out for the school play, you participated in a swimming meet, you tried out for the debate team, you applied to a school that you really wanted to get into that was going to be a long shot, but you gave it your best efforts. You had a job and tried to learn a new skill, and maybe you didn't succeed at first, but you hung in there. Those are the kinds of failures we want to celebrate, not the random, let's just go out and do crazy stuff. So I've seen both sides of that kind of conversation.
Oh, I love it. And I love the clarity behind it as well. Before I ask my last question, tell us where we can find more about your work online and where we can get your book.
Okay, so my books, I have 7 out there. The most recent one I'm a co-author of is called Thriving Women, Thriving World, and it's a very important book about how women can thrive in the world in new and different ways. But Getting Grit and Creating Your Best Life are my goal-setting book, and how do you cultivate the qualities of grit. Those are available on Amazon, really everywhere. My first book, My Name is Caroline, is still available. It came out in 1988, and this was the first book written by anyone who survived bulimia, which is really hard to believe, but it was a hopeless time in life, and nobody knew anybody who had gotten better from it. So I really felt compelled to just give people hope. So that book, all the way through Thriving Women, Thriving World, they all have a thread around let's do hard things. Let's give other people hope that they can do hard things too. And in the end, let's all flourish as we live our best lives and leave no regrets behind. So CarolineMiller.com is my website, and that's pretty much ground zero for everything you need to know about me or my newsletter or anything else.
Beautiful. Caroline, tell us, what does it mean to you to live an empowered life?
An empowered life to me means that every day I live by the credo, you can't keep what you don't give away. When I was overcoming my eating disorder 35 years ago in a 12-step program for compulsive eaters, I remember that somebody said to me, "Wow, Caroline, it's great that you're getting better, but you can't keep what you don't give away." And in that moment, I discovered what real joy was, because I realized that if you don't turn around and pull someone else with you or share the knowledge that you have that's made a difference in your life, or lend someone else a helping hand, or help them in achieving any goal that's important to them, that's not real joy. You have to be a participant in other people's lives as well, because we know in positive psychology, it boils down to other people matter. So an empowered life for me is one where I'm empowering other people as well.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Caroline. And I hope we flex our muscles and get a little grittier because of the conversation. Thank you.
This was a fabulous interview. Thank you for doing the homework required to ask really pertinent questions. That really shows your diligence and real kindness. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Your work has been a blessing. So thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Empowered Kids TV. We loved having you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified of our next episode. And I have 2 favors to ask of you. The first is, if you found value in this interview, be sure to share it with your family and friends so that we can continue to uplift families all across the globe. And the second is, join in on the conversation. We love hearing from you, reading your comments, and just watching how many of you like the videos and share your aha moments. And remember, Empowers, as we always say at the village, you're just one connection away. Until next time, with love and gratitude.